In this video we are going to talk about the Ed Gein, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Before starting this video, like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. Edward Theodore Gein, popularly known as the Plainfield Ghoul or the Butcher of Plainfield, was a serial killer and corpse snatcher in the United States. Gein's crimes, which took place in and around his hometown of Plainfield, Wisconsin, gained national attention in 1957 after investigators learned he had excavated bodies from local cemeteries and made trophies and souvenirs out of their bones and skin. Gein also admitted to killing two women, Mary Hogan, the owner of a bar, in 1954, and Bernice Worden, the owner of a hardware shop, in 1957. Gein was placed in a mental health facility after being deemed unable to face trial. By 1968, he had been declared competent to stand trial. He was convicted of the murder of Wardens, but he was found legally insane and committed to a mental institution. On July 26, 1984, at the age of 77, he died of respiratory failure at Mendota Mental Health Institute. He is interred in Plainfield Cemetery, adjacent to his family, in an unmarked grave. Augusta despised her husband, an alcoholic who couldn't retain a job. He'd worked as a carpenter, tanner, and insurance salesman in the past. For a few years, George ran a local grocery store, but he sold it, and the Gein family left the city to live in seclusion on a 155-acre, 63-hectare farm in Plainfield, Wisconsin, which became their permanent home. Augusta took advantage of the farm's solitude by excluding people who could have had an influence on her sons. Gein only left the farm to go to school. Gein spent most of his time outside of school on farm chores. Augusta was a devout Christian who claimed to be Lutheran. She lectured to her sons about the world's inherent immorality, the dangers of alcohol, and her opinion that all women, except from herself, were innately promiscuous and devil's instruments. She set aside time every afternoon to read to them from the Bible, frequently choosing verses about death, murder, and divine punishment from the Old Testament and the Book of Revelation. Gein was quiet, and his classmates and teachers recall him for odd habits like seemingly random chuckling, as if he was laughing at his own personal jokes. Augusta made things worse by punishing him anytime he tried to make friends. Gein did fairly well in school, notably in reading, despite his poor social development. Ed Gein's father George died of heart failure induced by his alcoholism on April 1, 1940, at the age of 66. To assist pay for their living expenses, Henry and Ed started doing odd jobs around town. Residents of the town thought of the brothers as trustworthy and honest. Ed routinely babysat for neighbors while both of them worked as handymen. He adored babysitting and seemed to connect with children more easily than adults. Henry began dating a divorced mother of two with the intention of moving in with her. He was concerned about his brother's devotion to their mother and frequently disparaged her in front of Ed, who was taken aback and saddened. Henry and Ed were burning marsh grass on the farm on May 16, 1944. The fire got out of hand, attracting the attention of the local fire department. Ed reported his brother missing towards the end of the day, after the fire had been put out and the firefighters had left. A search group used lamps and spotlights to look for Henry, whose body was discovered laying face down. He had apparently been dead for some time, and the cause of death appeared to be heart failure, as he had not been burned or otherwise wounded. Henry was later found to have bruises on his head, according to author Harold Schechter. The police ruled out foul play, and the county coroner ultimately determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation. The accident scenario was accepted by the authorities, but no formal inquiry or autopsy was carried out. State investigator Joe Wilimowski brought up issues regarding Henry's death while questioning Ed Gein about the death of Bernice Worden in 1957. In retrospect, it was possible and likely that Henry's death was the Cain-enabled part of this case, according to George W. Arndt, who examined the case. Gein and his mother were on their own now. Soon after Henry's death, Augusta suffered a debilitating stroke, and Gein devoted himself to her care. In 1945, Gein and his mother went to a man named Smith, who lived nearby, to buy straw, as he subsequently recalled. Augusta saw Smith hitting a dog, according to Gein. A woman from inside Smith's house begged for him to stop, but Smith continued to beat the dog to death. Augusta was visibly disturbed by this scenario. Nevertheless, it did not appear that it was the brutality against the dog that troubled her, but rather the presence of the woman. Augusta informed Ed that the woman was not Smith's wife and hence had no right to be there. Augusta angrily referred to her as Smith's harlot. Her health quickly deteriorated after she suffered a second stroke. She died at the age of 67 on December 29, 1945. Ed had been heartbroken by her death. As author Harold Schechter put it, he had lost both his only companion and real love. And he was the only one on the planet. Gein clung to the farm and supplemented his income with odd employment. He boarded up his mother's rooms, such as the upstairs, downstairs parlor, and living room, and left them alone. While the rest of the home deteriorated, these rooms remained immaculate. After then, Gein resided in a small room close to the kitchen. He began reading pulp magazines and adventure novels about this period, particularly ones involving cannibals or Nazi atrocities. Gein worked as a handyman and earned a federal farm subsidy beginning in 1951. He worked on occasion for the local municipal road crew and crop threshing workers. He also sold an 80-acre, 32 hectares, plot of land owned by his brother Henry between 1946 and 1956. Gein was charged with one count of first-degree murder in Massare County Court on November 21, 1957, and pleaded not guilty due to insanity. Gein was judged mentally incompetent and so unfit for trial after being diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was transported to the Mendota State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin, from the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, now the Dodge Correctional Institution, a maximum security facility in Waupun, Wisconsin. Doctors concluded in 1968 that Gein was mentally capable of conferring with counsel and participating in his defense. The trial began on November 7, 1968, and lasted 1 week. A psychiatrist testified that Gein told him he didn't know whether Bernice Worden's death was deliberate or accidental. Gein had told him that a gun went off in Worden's store while he was inspecting it, killing Worden's. Gein testified that the gun discharged after he attempted to load a round into it. He said he had not pointed the rifle at Worden's and had no further recollection of what had happened that morning. Gein's trial was held without a jury at the request of the defense, with Judge Robert H. Golmar presiding. On November 14, Golmar found Gein guilty. A second trial was held to determine Gein's sanity. After hearing testimony from both prosecution and defense doctors, Golmar found Gein not guilty by reason of insanity and confined him to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. Gein was sent to a mental institution for the rest of his life. According to Judge Golmar, Gein was only tried for one murder, that of Mrs. Worden's, due to the expensive costs. He also confessed to the murder of Mary Hogan. On March 30, 1958, his belongings were to be auctioned, amid reports that the home and the grounds it stood on would be turned into a tourist attraction. The house was completely destroyed by fire on March 20, early in the morning. A deputy fire marshal testified that a garbage fire was started 75 feet, 23 meters, from the house by a cleaning staff assigned to dispose of garbage, that hot coals were retrieved from the bonfire site, but that the fire did not spread along the ground from there to the house. Although arson was suspected, the cause of the fire was never determined. It's probable that Fire Chief Frank Worden's, son of Bernice Worden's, Gein's last victim, did not perceive the fire to be an emergency. Just as well, Gein shrugged when he learnt of the incident while in custody. To see it, Gibbons levied a fee of $25 to carnival guests. Before it was stolen in 1999, Gein's burial marker had been vandalized. On July 26, 1984, at the age of 77, Gein died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute from respiratory failure caused by lung cancer. Souvenir hunters chipped away at his gravestone in Plainfield Cemetery over the years, until the stone was taken in 2000. It was discovered in Seattle, Washington, in June 2001, and was taken to the Massare County Sheriff's Department for storage. The gravesite is now unmarked, but not forgotten. Gein is buried in the cemetery with his parents and brother. What do you think about this video? Do let us know down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.